My dad looked me in the eyes and said, "Family resources should benefit everyone," after demanding my inherited house for my brother. So I calmly replied, "Then why aren't you giving him your own house?" He said it after demanding that I hand over the beach house I inherited from my grandmother to my brother Michael, because Michael had a wife and kids. So I looked back at him and said, "If that's true, why aren't you giving him your house?" 2 years ago, my grandmother passed away. We had always been incredibly close. When I was growing up, I spent every summer with her at her beach house. Even after I became an adult, I still visited her regularly. That house was never just a vacation place to me. It was where she taught me how to surf. It was where she showed me the hidden spots along the coast that tourists never found. It was where we would sit on her deck for hours, watching the sunset and talking about life while the ocean moved in front of us like it had all the time in the world. When her will was read, I was shocked to learn that she had left the beach house to me. Along with the deed, there was a handwritten letter from her. I still keep that letter in my nightstand. In it, she wrote about how she had watched me find peace in that house. She wrote that the ocean seemed to heal something in me. She said she wanted me to always have that sanctuary. She specifically mentioned that she knew I needed a place to escape from the pressure of modern life. My brother, Michael, who is 33, received an equal inheritance in cash. It was roughly the same value as the beach house. My father, David, who is 58, inherited my grandmother's main residence, a beautiful colonial house in the suburbs that was worth considerably more than either my inheritance or Michael's. At the time, everyone seemed satisfied. The beach house is not some mansion. It is a modest 3-bedroom cottage built in the 1960s, about 2 hours from where I live. It needs constant maintenance, and I have given it that maintenance lovingly. I kept my grandmother's wind chimes on the porch. I kept her collection of sea glass in the windows. I even kept her ancient coffee maker, the one that only works if you hit it in exactly the right spot. I work in tech, and my schedule is demanding. Most weeks, I work 60 to 70 hours, so I mostly use the house on weekends, with the occasional longer stay when I can work remotely. But even if I am not there every single day, that house has become essential to my mental health. It is where I decompress. It is where I surf, read, breathe, and exist without the constant ping of notifications and demands. About 6 months ago, things started to change. It began with small comments from my father during family gatherings. "Such a shame that beautiful house sits empty during the week," he would say. Or, "3 bedrooms for one person seems excessive." I laughed it off at first. I explained that I was there as often as I could be, and that maintaining the house was a labor of love. Then, about 3 months ago, Michael started joining in. He would mention how cramped his kids were becoming in their current home. His son Christopher is 5, and his daughter Emma is 3. He talked about how excellent the schools near the beach supposedly were. He talked about how unfair it was that I got the prize of the inheritance while he just got money. He conveniently forgot that he had used that money on a boat and a kitchen renovation. Last Sunday, during our monthly family dinner at my parents' house, they tag-teamed me in what felt like a planned attack. We had barely finished the main course when my father cleared his throat and launched into a prepared speech about family resources being used efficiently. He said my grandmother, while meaning well, could not have foreseen how the family's needs would evolve. He actually used corporate buzzwords like maximizing utility and resource allocation. Michael jumped in immediately. He painted this emotional picture of his kids growing up by the beach, learning to surf like we did, building sandcastles every morning. His wife, Jennifer, who is 32, joined in with research she had apparently done on the local schools. She showed me rankings on her phone and talked about how the sea air would be good for Christopher's asthma. That was a condition I had somehow never heard them mention before. The whole thing built up to my father suggesting that I should either gift the house to Michael or sell it to him at a family discount, about 40% below market value. When I asked why Michael could not just buy a beach house with his own inheritance money, Jennifer actually laughed and said he had already spent it on responsible family investments. By that, she meant the boat he uses twice a year and their kitchen that looks like it belongs in a magazine, but that their kids are not allowed to eat in. I reminded them that my grandmother had left specific instructions in her will. She wanted me to have that house. I even offered to read them her letter, although honestly, it felt too personal to share. My father's response chilled me. "Mom was getting sentimental at the end," he said. "She wasn't thinking clearly about what was best for the family's future." When I firmly said no, Michael accused me of being selfish. He said I only used the place as a bachelor pad for weekend parties, which is laughable to anyone who knows me. My idea of a wild weekend is reading 3 books and falling asleep on the deck at 9 at night. My father shook his head and told me he was disappointed in my lack of family values. He said I was incapable of seeing the bigger picture. My mother, Barbara, who is 57, had been silent during dinner. Later, she pulled me aside in the kitchen. She said she understood why I wanted to keep the house, but asked if I would consider some kind of timeshare arrangement. Maybe they could have it during the summer months when the kids are off school, she suggested. When I pointed out that summer is when I use the house most, she sighed and said I was putting her in an impossible position. Even my girlfriend Lisa, who is 29 and usually completely supportive, asked on the drive home if maybe I was being too rigid. She knows how much the house means to me. She has seen me there. She has seen how my entire demeanor changes when we cross the bridge onto the island. But she still wondered if there was some compromise that could keep the family peace. I felt betrayed that even she was suggesting I should consider giving up my sanctuary. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about all the mornings I had watched the sunrise from my grandmother's deck, coffee in hand, planning a day of surfing. I thought about the nights I had spent there after brutal work weeks, slowly feeling human again. I thought about the weekend I spent there after my last relationship ended, walking the beach for hours until I finally felt like myself again. How could I explain to them that it was not just a house? It was where I went to remember who I was. Was I really the bad person for wanting to keep inherited property that had been specifically left to me? The house means everything to me. It is not just about property value or having a weekend getaway. It is about having a place where I can breathe. It is about existing without pretense or pressure. It is about honoring my grandmother's wishes and the bond we shared. But my entire family was making me feel like some kind of selfish monster for not handing over my inheritance to my brother just because he chose to have children. 3 weeks later, things escalated, and I reached my breaking point. After everything that happened at that dinner, I spent weeks second-guessing myself. But the overwhelming response from people who heard the story gave me the confidence to stand firm. The comments about family entitlement and honoring my grandmother's wishes stayed with me. They made me feel less insane for believing that no meant no. Unfortunately, what happened next was beyond anything I could have imagined. 2 weeks after that dinner, I left work early on Friday, around 2 in the afternoon, instead of my usual 7 in the evening. I had been having a particularly brutal week, and I needed to get to the beach house. The entire drive, I felt my shoulders slowly relaxing. I was looking forward to my weekend routine. I would arrive, open all the windows to let the sea air in, make a simple dinner, and fall asleep to the sound of the waves. As I turned onto the coastal road, I noticed more traffic than usual. Tourist season was starting, so I did not think much of it. Then I pulled up to my house, and my stomach dropped. My father's BMW was in the driveway. Michael's SUV was there too, along with Jennifer's sedan. My parking spot, the one under the shade of the old oak tree my grandmother planted, was blocked. I sat in my car for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. Through the windows, I could see movement inside my house. The front door was wide open. My grandmother's wind chimes were singing in the breeze as if nothing was wrong. When I walked in, the scene was surreal. My father was sitting at the dining table with papers spread out in front of him. Michael and Jennifer were in the kitchen. Jennifer was cooking with my pans, while Michael opened a beer from my fridge. The kids were in the living room, toys scattered everywhere, watching cartoons on my TV. They had even moved some of the furniture around. My father looked up casually and said, "James, good, you're here. We're having a family meeting about the beach house situation." I thought neutral ground would be best for a productive discussion. "Neutral ground?" I sputtered. "This is my house." Jennifer turned from the stove with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "We're making tacos," she said. "There's plenty if you're hungry. I hope you don't mind, but your spice rack was a bit lacking, so I brought some from home." The audacity left me speechless. Then my nephew Christopher ran up to me holding one of my grandmother's old painted seashells, the ones I keep on the mantel. "Uncle James," he said, "Daddy says this is going to be my room." He pointed to the guest room, the one with the ocean view. That is the room I use as my office. I have spent countless hours in there working remotely, looking up from my screen and finding inspiration in the horizon. I tried to stay calm. "Everyone needs to leave," I said. "Now. This is trespassing." Michael laughed. He actually laughed. "Trespassing? We're family. Dad has a key. Family doesn't trespass. They visit." "I changed the locks 3 weeks ago," I said slowly. "How did you get in?" My father at least had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "The property management company in town still had the old key on file from when Mom used them," he said. I explained the situation, and they understood about family needing access. I was shaking with rage. Not only had they entered my house without permission, but they had also manipulated a local business my grandmother had trusted for decades. Then I noticed Jennifer's notebook. It was open to sketches of kid-friendly renovations, including removing my grandmother's built-in bookshelves to make room for toy storage. "You have 1 hour to leave," I said. My voice was deadly calm. "Or I'm calling the police." That was when my father stood up. He used his full height in that way he always did when he wanted to intimidate someone. "You would call the police on your own family?" he said. "Your grandmother would be ashamed. She valued family above everything." "She valued respect and boundaries," I shot back. "That is why she left me this house, because she knew I would take care of it, not treat it like I was entitled to it." The situation deteriorated quickly. Jennifer started crying, saying I was traumatizing the children by threatening their parents. Michael accused me of being exactly what was wrong with millennials: selfish, materialistic, and willing to put property over people. My father pulled out his phone and called my mother. He put her on speaker so she could talk sense into me. The final straw came when I went to use the bathroom and found Michael in my bedroom, my private space. He was holding a measuring tape, checking whether their California king bed would fit. He had even moved some of my things around to visualize the new layout. On my dresser, beside the photo of my grandmother and me at my college graduation, he had placed a sticky note. It said, "Move to the garage." I lost it. I completely lost it. I yelled at him to get out. I told him he had no right to even think about rearranging my private space. He tried to gaslight me, saying I was overreacting and that he was just planning for the inevitable. That was when I called the police. While we waited, my father tried every manipulation tactic in the book. He talked about family legacy. He talked about how my grandmother's house should be filled with children's laughter. He talked about how I was choosing to be alone and bitter. Jennifer packed up her taco supplies with theatrical sighs, telling the kids that Uncle James did not want them there. Christopher started crying and asked why I was being mean. When the officers arrived, I showed them the deed. I explained the situation. I showed them text messages from 3 weeks earlier where I had explicitly stated that no one was welcome at the property without my express permission. My father tried to argue that it was a civil matter, just a family dispute that did not require police intervention. The officers disagreed. They told everyone to leave immediately. As they gathered their things, Michael hissed that I was everything wrong with my generation and that I would die alone in that house. Jennifer loudly told the children that some people valued things more than family. My father said nothing, but the look he gave me was meant to communicate complete disappointment and disgust. After they left, I discovered they had already made small changes. They had moved my coffee maker to make room for a kid's snack station. There were juice boxes in my fridge. They had even started a grocery list on my whiteboard, crossing off items I had listed and adding their own. The violation felt so much deeper than trespassing. They had tried to erase me from my own space. I spent that night installing new locks, smart locks this time, with unique codes I could control remotely. I also installed security cameras around the property. Then I hired a lawyer to send a formal cease and desist letter to all of them, making it clear that any further attempt to enter the property would result in criminal charges. The family fallout was swift and brutal. My mother called daily, crying about how the family was being torn apart. Extended relatives I had not spoken to in years started reaching out to tell me I was being unreasonable. My cousin posted on Facebook about how some people forget where they come from and start thinking they are too good for family. I had to block most of them. Lisa was supportive, but frustrated with the drama. She said she did not understand why they could not just respect my boundaries. She suggested selling the house just to end the conflict, but I refused. Why should I give up my inheritance, my sanctuary? Because they felt entitled to it. The next time I headed back, I was anxious. Part of me expected to find broken windows or worse. The peace I had once found there felt tainted now, but I was determined to reclaim it. It was my house, my inheritance, my connection to my grandmother. I was not going to let them take that from me. 5 weeks after the first update, everything went nuclear. I was sitting in a hotel room, alternating between rage and disbelief, trying to document everything while it was fresh. Part of me was doing it for legal reasons. Part of me was doing it because I needed to process what had just happened. On Friday, I decided to leave work at noon. I had been anxious all week about returning to the beach house, but I figured arriving in broad daylight would be safer. The drive felt different this time. Instead of my usual relaxation, I spent 2 hours with my shoulders tense, checking my security camera app every time I hit a red light. Everything looked normal on the cameras, but I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. As I turned onto my street, I immediately knew my instincts had been right. There were cars everywhere. Michael's SUV, a large moving truck, my father's BMW, several cars I did not recognize. My security app had not alerted me because they had apparently figured out how to approach from the beach side, avoiding the cameras. I pulled over a few houses down and called my lawyer. He advised me to document everything and call the police immediately if they were inside. With shaking hands, I started recording video on my phone and walked toward my house. The front door was wide open. Not just unlocked. Wide open. There were boxes stacked on the porch. I could hear voices inside, multiple people talking and laughing. Through the window, I could see strangers carrying furniture. Movers? They were carrying my furniture out and other furniture in. I walked through my own front door and found my worst nightmare. The living room was chaos. My couch was gone, replaced with Michael and Jennifer's sectional. My grandmother's antique coffee table had been pushed against the wall, and a child-proofed monstrosity had taken its place. The walls I had carefully touched up over a weekend the previous year were already marked with crayon. Jennifer was in the kitchen unpacking. Not visiting. Not having a meeting. Unpacking. She was placing her dishes in my cabinets, humming to herself as if this was perfectly normal. My grandmother's china, which I used every Sunday morning for breakfast just like she had, was boxed up on the counter. The box was labeled Garage. My brother's kids were running around with their toys everywhere. Emma had taken over the place where I keep my surfboards. Her dollhouse was exactly where my board rack used to be. Christopher was jumping on bubble wrap in the hallway, shouting about his new house. But the worst part, the absolute worst part, was my father. He was standing in the middle of it all, like a general surveying his troops, directing movers with my belongings. "That can go to the garage," he said about my bookshelf. "We won't be needing that," he said about my bar cart. I stood there for a full 30 seconds before Jennifer noticed me. And when she did, she smiled. She actually smiled. "Oh, James," she said. "We weren't expecting you until tonight. Don't worry, we saved your bedroom for you. We thought you'd want to keep visiting on weekends." Keep visiting. On weekends. In my own house. "Get out," I said. I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "Get out right now." That was when Michael appeared from the back deck, where he had been assembling what looked like a massive playset. "Jim, buddy," he said, "let's talk about this rationally. We're already here. The kids are enrolled in school starting Monday. Fighting this is just going to hurt everyone." Then my father approached me and put his hand on my shoulder in that condescending way he had. "Son," he said, "it's time to face reality. You're a single man with a demanding job who barely uses this place. Michael has a family that needs it. Your grandmother would understand. Family needs changed." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. That was when everything exploded. My father tried to grab my phone. He physically tried to take it from me. "Don't be ridiculous," he shouted. "This is a family matter." I stepped back, keeping the phone to my ear. "My family is stealing my house," I said to the operator. "Send police immediately." Michael came charging in from the deck. "Stealing?" he shouted. "We're your family. Mom and Dad gave me life too. Why do you get everything?" "I don't get everything," I shouted back, finally losing my composure. "You got the same inheritance I did. You spent yours on a boat and a kitchen renovation. That is not my fault." Jennifer started crying loud, theatrical sobs. "How can you do this to children?" she cried. "They think this is their home now. We told them they'd grow up by the beach." "Then you lied to them," I said. "Just like you're lying now, pretending you have any right to be here." Then my father, red-faced with rage, dropped the bomb. "I've already spoken to lawyers," he said. "You gave me a key originally. That establishes a pattern of family access. We are establishing residency. You'll have to formally evict us, and that takes months. By then, you'll come to your senses and realize this is what's best for everyone." "I changed the locks," I said. "You broke in." "Proved we had previous access," he countered. "The property management company confirmed I've had a key for years. No breaking required." That was when I realized this was not some spur-of-the-moment decision. They had planned this. They had consulted lawyers, or at least people they thought were lawyers. They had manipulated local businesses. They had enrolled the kids in school. They had hired movers. They had developed a whole strategy to take over my property and force me to deal with it afterward. This was a coordinated attack on my house and my life. The 911 operator had heard everything and assured me officers were on the way. The next 15 minutes were the longest of my life. Jennifer alternated between sobbing and trying to guilt me, showing me the kids' drawings of their beach house. Michael paced like a caged animal, occasionally throwing out insults about my selfishness, my inability to maintain relationships, and how I would die alone, surrounded by money instead of family. My father was the worst. He turned cold and calculating. He started talking about my grandmother's real wishes. He claimed she had told him privately that she hoped I would grow up and share with my brother. When I called him a liar, he said I was too blinded by greed to see the truth. The movers, to their credit, had stopped working. They were clearly uncomfortable. One of them approached me quietly and said they had been told this was a family property transfer and that all parties were in agreement. He showed me the work order. Michael had forged my signature. When the police arrived, 3 cars with lights flashing, the narrative my family tried to spin was incredible. My father claimed I had agreed to let Michael try living there for the summer. Jennifer wailed about their children being made homeless. Michael accused me of having rich boy syndrome and said I was probably on drugs to be acting so irrationally. I showed the officers my documentation. I showed them the deed. I showed them the cease and desist letter my lawyer had sent. I showed them text messages explicitly denying them access. I showed them the security footage of them arriving with a moving truck. And the forged signature on the moving company's paperwork sealed it. The lead officer told everyone they needed to leave immediately or face arrest for breaking and entering, criminal trespassing, and fraud. That was when my 5-year-old nephew, sweet Christopher, who I have always adored, ran up to me with tears streaming down his face. "Uncle James," he cried, "why are you stealing our house? Daddy said you don't need it, and we do. Don't you love us?" My heart broke. This innocent child had been weaponized against me. They had filled his head with lies, and now he thought I was the villain. I knelt down and said, "I love you very much, buddy, but this isn't your house. Your daddy made a mistake." Michael yanked his son away from me. "Don't talk to him, Chris," he said. "Uncle James cares more about houses than family." As the police supervised their exit, the scene was chaos. Jennifer had to repack boxes while sobbing about the school enrollment fees they would lose. Michael loaded his kids into the car while loudly telling them that some people were just selfish, and that was why they ended up alone. My father said nothing to me directly, but he told the officers that this was family business and that I would regret getting law enforcement involved. The movers had to reload everything and take it back. It took 3 hours to get everyone out and to get my belongings back in place. And back in place is generous. My house looked like a tornado had hit it. My furniture was scattered. My kitchen was in chaos. My personal items were stuffed in random boxes. After everyone left, I called a locksmith for an emergency visit. While I waited, I discovered the full extent of what they had done. They had forwarded mail to my address in Michael's name. There were children's life preservers hanging in my shed. They had installed child safety gates at the top and bottom of the stairs. In my office, my desk had been dismantled and pushed against the wall to make room for bunk beds that were halfway assembled. The locksmith installed new high-security locks that could not be picked or duplicated without my authorization. I also called a security company to install a comprehensive system with cameras covering every angle, motion sensors, and a direct connection to the local police. That night, I could not stay in the house. It felt violated. It felt like a crime scene. I drove to a hotel an hour away and finally broke down. Not just tears, full-body sobs. The house my grandmother left me, my sanctuary, had been turned into a battlefield. I spent the next day with my lawyer. We began filing charges for breaking and entering, fraud for the forged signature, and a restraining order against all of them. My lawyer said their residency plan was legally nonsense and had probably come from some sovereign citizen website rather than actual legal advice. We were also suing for damages. They had done about $3,000 worth of damage to the walls and floors during their attempted move-in. My phone would not stop ringing. My mother left 17 voicemails, each one more hysterical than the last. Extended family members called me a monster. Someone, and I suspected it was Jennifer, posted on social media about how I called the police on children and made a family homeless out of greed. I received death threats from people I went to high school with. But here is the thing. I was done. I was done feeling guilty. I was done being manipulated. I was done with their entitlement. They could have asked to visit. They could have requested to rent it for a week. If they had approached me with respect and understanding, I might have even offered to let them use it occasionally. But instead, they tried to steal my house. They traumatized children with their lies, and they destroyed the family in the process. I blocked them all on everything. I proceeded with all legal charges. The restraining order was expected to be in place by the following week. My therapist, who I called for an emergency session, told me that what they had done was criminal and abusive, and that I should feel no guilt for protecting myself and my property. Lisa became my rock through all of it. She fielded calls. She helped me sort through legal paperwork. She reminded me again and again that I was not crazy. We planned to go to the beach house together the next weekend to properly clean it and reclaim it. She suggested a cleansing ceremony, burning sage and making new memories to override the violation. I knew I would likely never have a relationship with my father or my brother again. That ship had not just sailed. They had set it on fire and sunk it. My mother might be salvageable someday, but not while she was enabling them. As for the extended family, they could think whatever they wanted. They had shown their true colors. My grandmother left me that house because she knew I would cherish it. She knew I would respect it. She knew I would find peace there. I failed to protect it once. Never again. It was mine, legally and morally, and I would be damned if I let anyone make me feel guilty for that. To anyone dealing with entitled family, document everything. Change your locks, install cameras, get a lawyer, and do not, for 1 second, feel guilty about protecting what is yours. Family is not just blood. Family is respect, love, and boundaries. Anyone who tries to violate those is not family worth having. 1 month later, there was a legal update. The restraining order was granted against all three of them, my father, Michael, and Jennifer. They were not allowed within 500 feet of the property or within 500 feet of me personally. Michael tried to contest it. He claimed it was excessive and that it would prevent family gatherings. The judge reviewed the security footage and the forged moving documents, then called their actions a premeditated attempt at theft through deception. The order was upheld. The criminal charges moved forward. The district attorney took the case seriously, especially because of the forgery. Michael was facing potential jail time, although his lawyer was pushing for a plea deal. My father was being charged as an accomplice. Jennifer tried to claim that she had only been following her husband's lead, but the prosecutor had her on video directing movers with my belongings, so that defense was not going anywhere. The civil lawsuit was still ongoing. My lawyer was confident we would recover damages plus legal fees. The moving company cooperated fully. They were mortified that they had been used in the scheme, and they provided all documentation showing that Michael had presented himself as the homeowner. The family fallout continued. My mother filed for separation from my father. She stayed with her sister and reached out through my aunt to apologize. She admitted that she had known they were planning something, but said she had not thought they would go that far. I told her I needed time, but that I was open to rebuilding our relationship eventually, just the two of us. Without my father's influence, the extended family drama mostly died down once the criminal charges were filed. It was funny how quickly family should share turned into, well, they shouldn't have broken the law once actual consequences appeared. Michael's in-laws apparently read him the riot act after learning that he had involved their grandchildren in a criminal scheme. The house slowly started feeling like mine again. Lisa and I spent every weekend there making new memories. I fixed the wall damage. I reorganized everything exactly how I wanted it. I added more security features. The sage cleansing actually helped. Maybe it was just psychological, but somehow, the house felt cleaner afterward. My therapist was incredible. We worked through not just this incident, but years of family manipulation that I had not fully recognized before. It turned out this was not the first time they had tried to take what was mine. It was just the most dramatic. One weekend, I found one of Christopher's toy cars under the deck. Instead of anger, I only felt sad. Those kids were victims too. They had been fed lies and used as weapons. I set aside money in a trust for them, money their parents would not be able to access, for when they were adults. Maybe, someday, we could have a relationship built on truth. I also started keeping a journal, writing letters to my grandmother about everything that had happened. I told her about the sunrise surf sessions. I told her about the books I read on her deck. I told her about the way her wind chimes still sang in the evening breeze. I thanked her for knowing I would need that place. I thanked her for trusting me with it. To everyone who shared their own stories of family entitlement and boundary violations, thank you. Those stories helped me feel less alone. They helped me understand that my response was justified. And to the people who said I should have just given them the house to keep the peace, I hope you never have to learn firsthand why that is terrible advice. Enabling entitlement does not create peace. It creates monsters who will demand more. The house is mine. The peace is returning. The family I lost was not worth keeping. And somewhere, I think my grandmother is proud that I stood my ground. I am closing this chapter now and looking forward to many peaceful weekends by the sea, exactly as my grandmother intended.